Okay, continuing along with The Rape of the Mind, we are in Chapter 7, and this is Part 4. Don't you just love these strange video effects that I can do? Makes it more fun. Anyway, these perversions are also incorporated into a great nationalistic myth, the Third Reich, the new empire, the People's Republic. And the citizen's desire to do something heroic becomes identified with doing something violent and criminal. Blood becomes a magic fluid, and shedding someone else's blood becomes a virtuous and life-giving deed. Unlimited killing, as it is practiced in totalitarian systems, is related to deep, unconscious fears. The weak and emotionally sick in any society kill out of fear in order to borrow in a magic way their dead victims' strength and happiness, as well as, of course, their material possessions. The killing of millions in the Nazi gas ovens was part of this ancient mythology of murder. Perhaps the members of the master race thought that slaughtering the Jews would ensure that the Germans would endure pain for as many centuries as had their victims. It is part of an old primitive myth that through killing one fortifies and prolongs one's own life. Let us not forget that forces of reason and understanding in man are rather weak. It is difficult to control the fire of explosive drives once they are lighted. Totalitarianism must kill, slaughter, make war. Totalitaria preaches hatred, and the totalitarian mouthpiece is a lonely, deluded, tough Superman calling for hatred and injustice and arousing intensified fanaticism unhampered by any moral feeling or remorse. His battle cry reinforces the dictator's hold on his subjects because each citizen, in and through his guilty deeds, learns to hate his victim, whose very suffering arouses even more the criminal's deeply buried sense of guilt. Verbocracy and semantic fog, talking the people into submission. After the First World War, we became more conscious of our attitude toward words. This attitude was gradually changing. Our trust in official catchwords and cliches and in idealistic labels had diminished. We became more and more aware of the fact that the important questions were what groups and powers stood behind the words and what their secret intentions were. But in our easygoing way, we often forget to ask this question. And we are all more or less susceptible to noisy, oft-repeated words. The formulation of big propagandistic lies and fraudulent catchwords has a very well-defined purpose in totalitaria, and words themselves have acquired a special function in the service of power, which we may call verbocracy. The big lie and the phony slogan at first confuse and then dull the hearers, making them willing to accept every suggested myth of happiness. The task of the totalitarian propagandist is to build special pictures in the minds of the citizenry so that finally they will no longer see and hear with their own eyes and ears, but will look at the world through the fog of official catchwords and will develop automatic responses appropriate to totalitarian mythology. The multiform use of words in double talk serves as an attack on our logic, that is, an attack on our understanding of what monolithic dictatorship really is. Hear, hear the nonsense. Peace is war, and war is peace. Democracy is tyranny, and freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Virtue is vice, and truth is a lie. So says the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's grim novel 1984. And we saw this nightmare fantasy come true when our soldiers, who had spent long years in North Korean prison camps, returned home talking of totalitarian China with the deceiving cliché of the people's democracy. Pavlovian conditioning to special words forces people into an automatic thinking that is tied to those words. The words we use influence our behavior in daily life. They determine the thoughts we have. In totalitaria, facts are replaced by fantasy and distortion. People are taught systematically and intentionally to lie. History is reconstructed, new myths are built up whose purpose is twofold: to strengthen and flatter the totalitarian leader and to confuse the luckless citizens of the country. The whole vocabulary is a dictated set of slowly hypnotizing slogans. In the semantic fog that permeates the atmosphere, words lose their direct communicative function. They become merely commanding signs, triggering off reactions of fear and terror. They are battle cries and Pavlovian signals and no longer represent free thinking. The word, once considered a first token of free human creation, is transformed into a mechanical tool. In totalitaria, words may have a seductive action, soothing or charming their hearers, but they are not allowed to have intrinsic meaning. They are conditioners, emotional triggers, serving to imprint the desired reaction patterns on their hearers. Man's mental laziness, his resistance to the hard labor of thinking, makes it relatively easy for totalitaria's dictator to bring his subjects into acceptance of the big lie. At first, the citizen may say to himself, all this is just nonsense, pure double talk, but in the very act of trying to shrug it off, he has become subject to the power of the inherent suggestion. That is the trick of double talk. Once a man neglects to analyze and verify it, he becomes lost in it and can no longer see the difference between rationale and rationalization. In the end, he can no longer believe anything and he retreats into sullen dullness. Once the citizen of totalitaria has accepted the logic of his leaders, he is no longer open to discussion or argument. Alas, in our Western world, we often meet this evasion of semantic clarity. Let us not forget that the battle for words is part of the ideological Cold War in our world. Something has crept into our mechanized system of communication that has made our modes of thinking deteriorate. People too casually acquire ideas and concepts. They no longer struggle for a clear understanding. The popularized picture replaces the battle of the pros and cons of concepts. Instead of aiming at true understanding, the people listen to thoughtless repetition, which gives them the delusion of understanding. Communication has an even more infantile, magic character for the citizen of totalitaria. Words no longer represent intelligible meanings or ideas. They bind the citizen of totalitaria to utter dependence on his commander, much as the infant is bound to the word pictures of his parents. And let's see. Well, we're moving right along here. I think it'll take one more video. Anyway, let me continue for a couple minutes. Logocide, or logocide. Byfield points out in his pamphlet on logocide that words are commonly used as instruments of social revolution. Politicians seeking power must coin new labels and new words with emotional appeal while allowing the same old practices and institutions to continue as before. The trick is to replace a disagreeable image, though the substance remains the same. The totalitarians consequently have to fabric a hate language in order to stir up the mass emotions. We all have experienced how the word peace doesn't mean peace anymore. It has become a propagandistic device to appease the masses and to disguise aggression. And that's where I'm going to stop it, and we will pick up in the next video. We are reading from chapter 7. We are reading in The Rape of the Mind. Focus in on that picture of the brain with a nutcracker on it. The brain looks like a walnut, and the nutcracker is going to snap that brain right open. See you in the next video.